Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm here today with Maj Gen Carter, Mr. Mark Correll, and Chief Master Sergeant Jerry Lewis to talk to you about upcoming changes to the Air Force Civil Engineering Force Development for our officers, enlisted and civilian airmen. Since we last spoke to you at the DT this summer in August timeframe with civilian and officer following the DT, quite a few changes have occurred within the Air Force that impact our community. And many of you have asked us how the stand-up of AFIMSC will affect military, civilian, Guard and Reserve, and force development. And so today, essentially what we want to do is give you an update of what we know at this point in time. We're choosing not to wait until we have every answer complete, but to give you an interim update. So that's what we chose to do today as we move forward. As we do this, I also want to remind you that from a total force perspective, the requirements that our Air Force and joint partner mission owners have for civil engineers has really not changed, and we may talk about that a little bit more. But we must continue to prepare our airmen for the future in the best way possible by providing invaluable mission support capabilities to the Air Force. And so today we're going to go through, we're going to answer some questions at the end, but we're going to begin with some opening statements from each of us in light of our perspective. And we'll begin with Chief Lewis, talking about enlisted airmen.
Thank you, sir. While CE reorganization and AFIMSC stand-up have little impact to enlisted force development, we are continuing to prioritize our enlisted force development requirements. We have a lot of work to do to make sure our career development plans best prepare enlisted airmen to meet the Air Force's strategic goals. Part of this includes figuring out how to get you the right type of leadership opportunities at the major commands. As I've said many times before, the success of Air Force civil engineering depends primarily on quality training. Shrinking budgets and force shaping are making it difficult for us to devote the time and the resources to OJT training. However, it's so important for NCOs and senior NCOs to lead meaningful, purposeful training programs that are interactive and not just rely on videos and mandatory computer-based training. We all need to work together to ensure that home station training is a priority and to leverage our NCOs and wage-grade craftsmen's knowledge base within each organization. Locally funded vendor training will need to fill the gaps created by decreased AETC training opportunities. But most importantly, NCOs must be flexible and proactive, seeking out unique leadership and training opportunities wherever they can.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Mark, can you talk to us a little bit about the civilian perspective?
Thanks, General Green. Let me start with what isn't changing for our civilians. First, your development remains based on you, the depth and breadth of your knowledge, your performance, your professional military education, your academic education, professional continuing education, and appropriate credentialing or registration. Our keystone and cornerstone constructs of expanded responsibility and critical continuity will not change. What will change are the locations and types of opportunities available to you to develop. Ultimately, MAJCOM opportunities will decrease and new and possibly different opportunities will be created by the AFIMSC. In much the same way that AFCAC became the center of gravity for development and experience when we combined our 3 legacy field operating agencies, I think the AFIMSC will be the primary location for you to get the management headquarters experience you need to broaden your vision. This means mobility will remain key for most folks who choose the Keystone path. We expect some positions to remain on the MAJCOM staff, but it's too early to define exactly what those are, and for that matter, what positions at the AFIMSC will be available. For now, anyway, I recommend you continue to view both MAJCOM and AFIMSC opportunities as equivalent. As the AFIMSC, its detachments, and the MAJCOM pictures develop, we'll ensure that the critical civilian keystone and cornerstone positions are identified and incorporated to ensure the viability of both Air Force installations missions and your career development. In the meantime, focus on the unchanging career development goals I began with. Continue to perform at the highest level and keep tuned to announcements as they occur. The key to our future success and yours is to continuing to develop as professionals and craftsmen.
Thanks, Mark. Finally, General Carter, I'll ask you to talk about the IMSC a little bit, and I also want to say thanks for being here. It's really important to us. The IMSC is such a significant change in our business that you being willing to come over and talk to us about what you see in the future for IMSC is really important, so thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. And I recognize that many of the questions from Millbook focused on the Air Force IMSC. And I'll pause here real briefly. I can tell that we're kind of struggling with the acronym a little bit. And for those that are watching this, what I have told people is if you want to remember how to get the letters in the correct order, that AFIMSC stands for I'm Supporting Commanders. And that's probably the key message I would have you take away from this is regardless of how the organization evolves, what it looks like in the future, that primacy of that mission and that focus to support commanders is never going to change. So I certainly appreciate the opportunity that you've given to me to provide as much insight as I can on how we're standing up the organization and what impact that may have on force development. As General Green said multiple times in different venues, we are working hand in hand with the personnel community to make sure that all people who are going to be assigned throughout the AFIMSC enterprise have the same opportunities as their MAJCOM counterparts. Now that we have a basing decision with the AFIMSC headquarters being approved to stand up at Joint Base San Antonio, we'll be able to step forward with many other decisions in the near future. We're looking at when we activate the detachments, and we think from an initial standpoint, sometime in the next 60 days would be the first time that we would put those positions on the books, and would also look for the initial cadre at the headquarters staff to begin arriving sometime in the late spring or early summer, and certainly much more to come.
Okay, thanks, General Carter. Now, in regards to our officer force, as we've already mentioned, there's going to be fewer MAJCOM authorizations available for civil engineers to rotate through, just as there will be for civilians and enlisted airmen. And that's really nothing new. We've been talking about that and talking about the need to balance MAJCOM opportunities with potential new IMSC opportunities. And as Mr. Correll said, AFIMSC is really going to be the context of the MAJCOM equivalent. And so that's how we're viewing them from an assignment perspective. There'll be other career broadening opportunities such as instructors at ROTC, executive officers, commanders action groups, and we intend to capitalize on those opportunities. And then we're also looking at increasing developmental opportunities or exchange programs with other organizations as we work through this. So the updated career field pyramid is being it's out for major command coordination today as we go through that, and we look to that, and we hope to get that out in the future. There's also work on the updated career field. The career path tool is what they call it, and how you can take a look at your career and manage that. And so we hope for that to get out in the near future as well. Once the guidance and rules of engagements are laid out to us, we'll provide you with additional information on the career path tool as well. And finally, we'll talk about IMAs briefly. So it's really important to us in our career field, and the health of the career field is to look at the total force. And the IMAs in the past have been very important to our career field, and we expect them to be very important to us in the future. And so for now, as we look at that, we're exploring options that can relocate some or all of these positions to the IMSC or the detachments as they get stood up. But for right now, we expect that the positions will remain at the Major Command headquarters locations for now in the near term until we get these positions located in the final perspective. So for the rest of today's webinar, we're just simply going to share the questions. So General Carter, Mr. Correll, Chief Lewis, and I will address the questions we've gotten through email and through the Millbook accounts. So we're just going to kind of walk through some of those. And Chief Lewis, I think I'll just put the first question to you, if you don't mind.
Okay, sir.
And so the question read, recently an opportunity came down from the Headquarters Air Force Director of Force Development for airmen to apply to the AY-15 enlisted, it's a long question. The AY-15 enlisted to Air Force Institute of Technology call for nominations. That was the call letter, and yet there were no opportunities for our CE airmen to apply. Of the 19 technical degree opportunities listed, civil engineering airmen could easily compete for and benefit from electrical engineering, engineering management, and environmental engineering degrees. Really, the bottom line of the question is, why were we not allowed to compete for that?
Sir, great question. And I appreciate anyone who has already asked this question. I've had to address it a couple times. Actually, I've had to address it a couple times over the last couple of years. Believe it or not, we have an EOD Senior Master Sergeant that will graduate from the Enlisted to AFIT program this May. One of the challenges that we have with a lot of our academic programs is that we need to show a return on our investment. So 3 years ago, underneath Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Roy at the time, in order to be a career field that was blanket policy eligible for any of these degree programs, we had to have an enlisted position out there somewhere within the Air Force that required a master's degree. Now, we don't have any of our positions that requires a master's degree. However, we still advocated that we allow our Air Force enlisted civil engineer airmen, any 3E NCO airman who's got a bachelor's degree, to be able to compete for the enlisted to AFIT program. And that's how this EOD, Senior Master Sergeant, was able to get into the program. You can still apply, you can still compete. If you're selected as one of the finalists, then your name will be sent to me as the career field manager to be able to release you, and I've got to be able to provide a legitimate position for you to go into based off of the type of degree that you get, so that we can utilize you and we have an effective program to be able to provide a return on the investment of getting that degree through the AFIT program. So I encourage you, if you've got the willingness and the want to be able to compete for one of these programs, please apply, and then as you make one of the finalists, your name, your AFSC will follow through your chain of command, and it will come to me to decide whether we can find a place based off of the degree for you to be able to work in our Air Force. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, Chief. I think the next one may be for you, Mr. Correll.
All right.
During the recent civilian leadership development discussion, the 4 pillars for advancement, which is breadth of experience, master's degree, PME, and professional licensing, were all narrowed down to 3 pillars, leaving out professional licensing. What are the criteria by which civilians will be graded to remain competitive in the future?
Great. Well, I'm glad for that question, because the first thing I want to do is, if in some way I put something out that led you to believe we've narrowed down to 3 pillars, then somehow or another I miscommunicated. So a few minutes ago, when my opening remarks, I think I laid out for you, and those still stay the same, the things we're looking for in our civilian. And so just to reiterate, the depth and breadth of your knowledge, your performance, your professional military education, your academic education, professional continuing education, and the appropriate credentialing or registration are all factors that we consider in your professional growth. So I don't want anybody to come away from this thinking there's only 3 things that you need to be focused on. You should be focused on all of those, and not necessarily all of them are equal. So at the end of the day, your performance, your depth and breadth of experience are going to be significantly more important than whether or not you have a credential. That said, since this specifically addresses credentialing, you will be seeing a policy letter coming out shortly, or a memorandum coming out shortly from me that goes, and folks, actually I think it's dual signed by myself and General Green to military and civilians, that encourages and describes the importance of credentialing as part of what you do. Whether you are an engineer, a housing professional, a real estate professional, there are credentials out there that define whether or not you say that you are competent in your career field. And that's one of the things we think are important for you to do. Now, you brought up the concept of grading. I don't grade individuals in terms of overall how are they doing on their job. That's what your supervisor does. But at the DT, it is important to know that those things that I mentioned that you should be focusing on are the criteria we use to do what you want to do in your force development. So when you send in a TCDP and you tell us you want to you want to move forward or you want to stay where you are, we're going to put you in a category, and that category is either going to be ready, groom, it's going to be develop, or stay in place. And those are going to be based on where you are on those criteria. And then we'll give you feedback in terms of what you need to do if you're trying to move to a different area than what we've put you in that category at the DT. So hopefully that answers your question.
Sir, if I may, I'd like to take the next one. You know how important training is to me. The opportunities for training continue to decline. What is being done to allow us to obtain training?
That's a great question. This is really about the budget, is what your part of the question is the resources become constrained, and they're going to continue to be constrained. And so we're looking at fewer seats in PME for officers, advanced degrees and things like that. So we continue to advocate within our business for the importance of the engineering degrees, the importance of the master's degrees or advanced degrees for us across the board, because we need engineers who know how to do their business from a technical perspective. So that's one aspect, and there's going to be seats available. You need to compete, and it's still important in our business. The other part of that is really what you talked about, the enlisted training or craftsman training, so military and civilian. Where do we get that? That continues to be a challenge for us, as you said in your opening statement. We will continue to push AETC for seats and allocations in their courses, but we recognize that installations at the squadron level are going to have to make some choices about using some of their resources to provide training that's required for the local craftsmen. And as I go about in talking to BCEs, I continue to emphasize that that is part of their job, that's part of their allocation of existing resources, and we recognize the constraints around that is appropriate, and we also recognize that that is why we need to continue to fund as fully and completely as we can sustainment dollars that goes to those installations so that they can make those choices. At times it may be choices between supplies and training, but we have to have our men and women trained and able to do their job. So we're going to ask the squadron commanders to make some of those decisions locally, and then we at our level at the headquarters will make as many resource decisions that we can and certainly advocate within the resourcing community. So it's going to be a hybrid of an answer of where that issue is going to reside.
Great.
Okay, with the addition of the material control to the 3E6 career field, are there going to be additional opportunities for personnel to receive training in CMAS in addition to the 3E6s receiving training once Next Gen and Tri-Riga come on board?
Oh, sir, as you know, between our air staff and our professionals down at FCAC, there's been a lot of work that has gone into Tri-Riga in getting it released, in addition to all the work that the bases has done with the subject matter experts as well. So the short answer to the question is yes, we are going to find those opportunities at the 3 skill level and some of our advanced courses to be able to insert that training, because as we both know, there's a lot of material acquisition and some other things that happen within current ACEs and IWIMs that our craftsmen do on a day-to-day basis. So we think it's important once we get it implemented into the 3E6 Tech School that we're able to take some of those lesson plans and also include them in some of our other AFSCs. Those professionals down at AFCAC that work with Chief Adams, all those force development managers, they work very, very hard to make sure that we provide all of our airmen the right skills at the right time, especially the initial skills, but we got to be careful. We don't want to teach them too much. We have to really, really rely on that OJT once they get to an installation. But yes, there is a plan in the future to make sure that we touch all of the AFSCs with some of the training that we need for Tri-Riga.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
You want me to ask this one, sir?
Sure, go ahead.
It's one of the most difficult ones for Mr. Correll. So, with respect to the training goals and objectives in the 2011 United States Air Force Civil Engineer Strategic Plan, will a documented career path for CE financial managers be established? And will an Air Force-wide OJT plan be developed for CE financial managers?
Okay, so I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to tell you what I think. And what I think our goals ought to be as we move down that road. So, and it isn't just going to be with respect to CE financial managers. Now, what I'm going to tell you is I recognize that our CE financial managers are a separate kind of capability than FMers that we see across the Air Force. And so we're going to have to recognize that, and we're going to have to develop that very specifically as we've done in the past. I would be hopeful that in the fairly near future we'll have a development path not only for the CE financial managers, but also for the for all of our different AFSCs within our career field series within the civilian workforce. With that in mind, I think that our financial managers, but everybody in general, at the end of the day, if you're looking to move forward in your career, it's about how marketable are you. Just if you were trying to go out today, if you were retiring looking for a different job somewhere, it's how do I market myself? So at the end of the, you need to be looking at, okay, so where are the areas I need to move? So surely we'll build a plan, but that's just going to be a plan. What kind of training opportunities are available for you today? So for example, I know that Mr. Bick has a program that actually comes through here quite a bit where we do training online, and hundreds of you get an opportunity to learn about financial management topics and develop yourself. You'll want to take advantage of those things as you move forward. You'll want to take advantage of the different jobs that are available to you to make yourself as marketable as possible. From an OJT piece of that, more broadly, we've looked at capabilities training, but I don't know that, perhaps General Carter has something on OJT. At this point, I don't really have a great answer for that.
So I know you've been really invested in understanding the financial business of the transition. So as y'all look at the financial aspect, any comments from what your perspective is?
Yeah, Tim, thanks. So as Chief was talking, as Mr. Correll was talking, really a couple of things where I think as the AFIMSC matures, we're going to start to see the value of having a focal point for combat support, installation support requirements. And what do I mean by that? So Chief was talking about training. We are going to have a directorate, the Expeditionary Support Directorate, that is going to be responsible for looking across all aspects of training for all of our combat support career fields. So if you think about how we allocate dollars today to the MAJCOMs and they in turn send the money down to the installations, we're providing everybody a little piece of the pie. Well, what can we do if we look at the whole pie, assess all the requirements, and then try and apply resources to meet those most pressing needs? So I think there's great opportunity and certainly great value in having a holistic approach to looking at training requirements, whether it's wastewater treatment plant certification for some of our wage grade employees. It's getting the horsepower of now a single organization to advocate with AFIT, to advocate with AETC for enhanced seats and quotas, or it's looking at, again, what kind of readiness training do we need across the different venues that we have between Silver Flag, security forces setting up their new site at Fort Bliss, and the Loggies up at Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst. On the financial management side, we're going to have a resources directorate with a focus on all things resourcing for installation. So much of the work that Roger Bick has been doing, and fantastic work at providing training venues and opportunities to talk to our financial managers, we will have a group focused and, quite frankly, a command that is focused on development of the civilian workforce. So I think there's great advantage to having the CE financial managers and a organization that's going to be looking at how do we best use and squeeze every ounce we can get out of every dollar we get. So again, I see it as a positive.
All right. Thanks.
Mr. Correll, if I could follow up with another question too. Sure. I've been hearing a lot about positions called key career positions. Can you explain them for me?
Sure. So this is not just a civil engineer installations program, but in fact it's an Air Force-wide program. And what all of the career fields have done is go through and look at, primarily for us in the GS-13 to GS-15 level, what are those developmental positions that if you're moving forward or you want to move forward in your career in the CE managed area, that we would want you to have those experiences. And then we've designated those positions as key career positions. And they are primarily Deputy Base Civil Engineers, MAJCOM, or in the future IMSC and Headquarters Air Force positions, where you need to get some specific experience, and we want to do that intentionally. There are about 112 of them that we've identified right now, and that's going to change, I think, in the future, but about 112 today. And the way this will work is those positions will be filled internally. They'll be filled on a slate, which means they won't go out for a competitive advertisement where everybody gets to compete. It'll be a case of the developmental team and the career field manager and working with the supervisors will determine a list of names of folks who have said they are interested in doing these jobs, and will provide that to the selecting official. Now, why would we do it that way? One of the important things to know about KCPs, the key career positions, is that there is a mobility agreement that goes with that. And it's different than the standard mobility agreement. This is one where you'll sign up for a 3-year tour, and at the end of 3 years, you'll move. And so we will do this by attrition, so folks that are in those key career positions today will not be on that, but as we fill them, every 3 years, we'll be changing folks out. It'll create the churn that we need so others have the opportunity to develop as we move forward. So we're looking forward to that program as a way to purposefully and intentionally develop civilians who have said they want certain kinds of skills.
All right, so as we transition many MAJCOM functions to the mission support arena, and specifically engineers, how do you see, General Carter, that we're going to stay in tune with the operational community we support?
Well, I think, so Mr. Correll started out by saying, you know, what's not going to change? And there are actually quite a few things that are not going to change. One, at the installation level, folks in our CE squadrons are going to continue to work for a group commander who works for a wing commander who's part of a MAJCOM construct. Many times when I have talked about what are we doing in consolidating all these activities, I like to remind people that CE squadrons, mission support groups, airbase wings, we don't do anything for our own benefit. We are there to serve and support the missions on that installations. It could be our own boss, if it's kind of the few bases in the Air Force that have one wing, one boss. Or you could be at a spot where you're supporting multiple Air Force missions and other service missions. We are all about trying to get the mission done. That's not going to change. And I think that's one of the advantages that our engineers have. When I look at, you know, different career fields, the perspective that our civil engineers have in being able to support the mission, I recognize I'm biased because I got one of those badges on, but I think it's second to none. Because from the time you're an airman to a brand new lieutenant to a young civilian, you understand how to operate on an installation and how the moving pieces and parts fit together. So I think at the installation level, we are absolutely going to stay in touch with the missions. Even at the next echelon, between the Major Command and the AFIMSC, we have some CE positions that are staying at the MAJCOM because they had a MAJCOM requirement. But again, in our detachments or in the IMSC itself, if we ever forget why we're there, who we support, then we will have failed. So I think we're going to be an integral part of the mission going forward, no matter how we're organized. What we do is just too important to making the mission happen.
Sir, how do we as a CE community plan to maintain our relevance to the Air Force as a whole rather than becoming stovepiped and insular within the IMSC?
Well, that's a good question, and it goes back a lot to what General Carter was talking about. Our relevance as engineers is really driven, both military and civilian engineers, is really driven by the mission for the Air Force. And as long as we're going to operate our missions from air bases, platforms, installations, whether it's CONUS, overseas, or for the military engineers in expeditionary environments, we are going to be relevant and needed by the Air Force. And so that's important to us as long as we're doing global vigilance, global reach, and global power. As long as we're buying F-35s where they have short legs and we're going to have to get close to the fight. So from a uniform perspective, we'll always be needed. If you're looking at Space Command and strategic, not Strategic Air Command, boy, that's dating myself, Global Strike Command. You know, we operate from our platforms in the United States solely, or in many cases predominantly, and so you've got a mix of military and civilian. So we are going to be relevant, we're going to remain relevant in the future. I think you used the word stovepiping in your conversation, and it gets back to what General Carter again I think expressed very well. Functions are transitioning to different organizations, but how we apply them and who we support and what we do is unchanged. And so just as engineers interact with our counterparts today, engineers are going to need to interact with their counterparts tomorrow. And I think most importantly, I'm going to ask that we learn and think about an enterprise view and become consistent or have an enterprise perspective. And so what does that mean, an enterprise perspective? If you're a young airman at the installation, I think that means understanding the area that you operate technically. If you're an electrician, you need to understand the systems on the base. You may be looking at your CDCs, and you look at the expeditionary. And so you want to understand your world and how that fits and how you support the installation from an electrical systems perspective, what's important on that base. If you're a squadron commander, you're going to look at understanding the installation operations, and then you're going to look at the next level of how to balance that at an operational perspective. You're going to add resourcing. How do I compete for resources in this resource-constrained environment so that I'm taking care of my wings mission and advocating for the things that I need to meet the mission, but I also have an Air Force enterprise perspective, and I recognize my job isn't to get every dollar the Air Force has for my base. My job is to help the Air Force make decisions about applying the right dollar to the next greatest need for the Air Force. And so it's a little bit different, but enterprise perspective is going to be important. And then we are going to have to communicate that outside of what was referred to as a stovepipe in the question. We got to think about the other perspectives. And so at each level, we all have a different enterprise. We're all going to operate that way, and we need to think about that enterprise and represent the enterprise to the outer customers, and then internally to ourselves.
Great. Ma'am, I think the little bit that I've been able to travel, a very common question since the announcement of the IMSC is, from now until the stand-up of the IMSC, how should the MAJCOMs approach workload balance as they continue to lose their personnel? And what will happen to the surplus personnel, both the enlisted and the civilian side?
Okay, again, and I recognize that is a common question, and one that's certainly in the forefront for a lot of our folks that are out at the installation. And I think recognizing the challenges that the Air Force had with drawing down management headquarters as a whole, so AFIMSC is just one subcomponent of the total reductions that the Air Force was asked to take. In a perfect world, we would have liked the transfer of workload and the drawdown of personnel to occur simultaneously, so that there was no gap between positions coming off the books, a new organization standing up, and having the ability and the personnel needed to execute the requirement. But it's not a perfect world, and things have not transitioned as smoothly as we would like. So at Corona in October of last year, in talking with our senior leaders, I think General Hostage expressed it very well. He said what he told his staff when he was the Air Combat Command commander was, we have a job to do, and until somebody taps us on the shoulder and lets us know that that capability has transitioned, we're going to continue supporting the installations. We are trying to come up with different ways in which we can backstop MAJCOMs as people have taken other opportunities and moved on. So across the total AFIMSC enterprise, as we stand up capability, how can we offer support? So the basing decision was a huge milestone to be able to allow us to start making some additional decisions and moving forward. It will now allow the personnel community writ large to start looking at our civilian employees and what is an appropriate timeline for placement. Just to give folks, I guess, an appreciation of the complexity of the task that we have. So the headquarters will be 350 people. We are transitioning roughly 900 full-time equivalents worth of work, delivering over 100 capabilities, and we're trying to figure out how to do it with 350 people. Our detachments, starting out about 414 people, will draw down over the next couple of years to 275. And so taking on that workload, sizing it, and organizing it in a way to deliver capability to the same degree that the MAJCOMs have, we're doing that in a deliberate fashion. And so the personnel community is working with us, trying to figuring out the phasing for when we would offer and look at some of the incentives for our civilian employees, be it via VSIP or things of that nature. We want to make sure as we transition capability that we don't do it too soon, so we don't have the maturity, capacity, or capability, and we don't wait too long so that the personnel are no longer there performing the duty. So right now, starting in April, we are projecting kind of a stair-step approach to transitioning capability to the headquarters and to the DETs, and to have that complete by the end of September. And so the personnel community is working on the timelines, and they should be getting the word out to the MAJCOM shortly on that. On the military side, we're working very closely with AFPC to ensure that if we have an enlisted member or an officer doing work that's going to go to one of the detachments, that we don't take action to PCS them if it's not time for them to PCS, because we really value that continuity. For the headquarters, we are working summer assignment cycles. We've done advertisement for our chief positions, and we're also working on the senior enlisted assignment. So hopefully those folks going to the headquarters will start arriving in San Antonio sometime this summer.
Great. MAJCOM transitioning to AFIMSC provides more opportunities for engineers to pursue career broadening experience through options such as COCOMs, cross-functional assignments, and partnership programs with private industry and the public sector. However, every other mission support career field will look to pursue the same opportunities. Our A1 and all mission support career field managers cross-talked competing opportunities and the numbers being vectored towards these opportunities, sir?
Well, first, let me compliment you on the long questions. You do those better than I do. But the questioner was correct, whoever wrote that question. Everybody is kind of looking at the same opportunities. They're concerned about force development across all of the career fields. And so competing is probably the wrong term, but we're all working with the A1 community to make sure the A1 understands what our requirements are as a career field. We've also taken a step back to look at what are the military requirements. And so we're making sure in all of our career fields to be making sure we have the right number of uniformed airmen in the jobs, because we don't need to career broaden and develop airmen who we don't need to fight the fight. And so all of that is going on. And as we talked about last summer, in August, we said, hey, we're going to open up some things, the aperture to career development and broadening opportunities. And we've had a great response, and I can tell you, certainly the team at AFPC and Dan Warner down there will tell you we've got a lot of applications, and between force shaping and our opening the aperture, we've already come to the point where we're really saying we've gotten enough inputs or requests to be released from the career field for a career broadening assignment that we're really saying no today, and we've got to manage that very carefully. And so it was a great response, and it demonstrates that our engineers are ready for any challenge. They're ready to go look at something else and contribute to the Air Force in multiple ways. And then we have to monitor that very carefully so that we don't get behind on our own ability to meet our requirements across the Air Force. And that is where we are actually going to be challenged as we move into the summer after the force shaping that occurred.
Okay, great. The next question, ma'am, for you. How are the IMSC positions at the detachments going to be filled, and through what organization? Are they going to be filled based on seniority, the RIF process priority, or are they going to be completely, competitively filled? The same question would also be relevant to the personnel currently located at the same location where they select to bed down the IMSC headquarters itself, of course now announced JBSA.
Okay, so good question, and it's one that I think there's not a perfect or complete answer yet. So the detachments first. I mentioned that we are looking to stand the organization up in phases. So part of standing up an organization is having a UMD. And a UMD is normally generated by having a concept of how your organization is going to be structured and what you need to deliver in terms of mission capability. So we have a starting point for a detachment structure, and we have about half the headquarters identified. The rest of the headquarters will be identified as we complete a series of business process reengineering events. Because as you might imagine, when you're taking, again, 900 FTEs worth of work, you're trying to fit it in 350. We have to fundamentally change how we're delivering capability today. If we can find a best-of-breed process between one of the MAJCOMs and that will work, we're going to use it. We may have to modify it to be as resource efficient as we can, and then we can determine what flavor of, officer enlisted, civilian, and what AFIMSC we put on the books. So for the detachments, the intent is to try and, again, create that initial starting point, and then if you were doing that work today, slide you over. Now it's kind of going to be a two-step tango. The plan we have right now, and it's still being tweaked, but if you're a military member, we want to do no harm. We want to look and see if you have any phase points coming up for, report closeouts, for school nominations, anything that would tell us, hey, maybe it makes sense to have you work in the detachment, but from an ADCON standpoint, stay with your existing chain of command. And then when it's appropriate to do so, chop you over. On the civilian side, what happens at the end of March? Appraisal closeout. So we're looking at what is the right timing for civilian transfer, again, to do no harm and to ensure that they can be appropriately recognized in their current organization. So we're thinking a chop over probably in June, and June to coincide with the closeout of the appraisal cycle and any award payments. The challenge in the detachments is what got transferred back in July, our original idea. As we develop the organization, we may tweak some of the requirements that go in there. So as we slide people over, it may change. And that's really the difficult part of the conversation, is I would really like to tell you, Chief Lewis, that you're going to be there forever and ever. And I'm not sure at this point, as I sit here today, that I can do that. And I know that that is difficult. For the headquarters, first, my understanding is that the personnel community would look to place surplus employees at the location of now the headquarters. The second step would be to look, and they're estimating to do this in the February timeframe, would be to put a call out and create a clearinghouse. And they've done this with other reorganizations, where affected employees will be asked, do you have a desire to relocate to San Antonio? And you go into a clearinghouse. And then based on the position requirements, hiring authorities can look at that clearinghouse, do interviews, and make selections. And then if we can't fill the headquarters from one of those two means, then we would do an open advertisement and competition for the civilians.
So ma'am, you've kind of answered this in several of the different questions, but is there a plan for military to transfer to the new IMSC first as cadre, followed later by civilian hires, or will it be all done at the same time? When will we have a firm timeline that will be published that shows the stand-up of the IMSC and stand-down of the MAJCOMs?
Great question. So we built an integrated master schedule that's going to track all the different muscle movements that go into everything from relocating the provisional headquarters from Andrews to San Antonio, doing all the associated hiring actions that you need to make happen, and probably most importantly is transferring capability from the MAJCOMs to the AFIMSC. And we created, basically looked at the capability library, tried to have a sense of priority of what things do we need to make sure we can do first. And you might guess resourcing. Right now the MAJCOMs have dollars in FY15, but FY16 we are going to be the central spot where those dollars come from the Pentagon and then we distribute to the installations. So we need to have the capability and capacity to receive the funds and further issue them out and advocate for requirements. So we've identified an initial cadre, it's about 157 people that will be in the headquarters. And we've started identifying some of the military positions, not quite the face yet. And then we have spent the last 2 weeks working with a team from Air Force Materiel Command, AFPC, and our provisional staff to look at about 70 civilian PDs. To the extent that we can, take a core doc or an SCPD and modify it to fit our need, we're doing that. And they've been great in collaborating with us to try to establish that initial cadre. We're going to swap out the provisional staff here in the March-April timeframe, and we expect a call to go out to the MAJCOMs, to the headquarters staff, and to the installations here probably in the next couple of weeks. And it would have people report in the March-April timeframe to coincide with kind of a staggered departure of the current provisional staff. Once we get a chance to go down to San Antonio, lay out a bed down plan and timing, we'll be able to let those folks know when we plan to transition from Andrews to JBSA. And really the final point I would share with folks is that I intend to initially stand up somewhat of an advon team, or for lack of a better word, more of an integration element there. Probably Colonel Duffy going down to do that. So we can start looking across the whole enterprise, and as we can, if a MAJCOM's really in a pinch, people have left, then is there another MAJCOM? Is there a PSU, so AFCEC, that could take that on and help that MAJCOM out until we stand up fully?
Yes,
so
ma'am.
Sorry, long-winded answer.
No, ma'am. And if I could, I'd like to just add that we've already, we're in the process of hiring your first CE chief. I know you've got a lot of career fields that you're responsible for, but working with Colonel Duffy, and I won't make the name public yet, but we're going through that process, but hopefully by Friday the assignment will be loaded in the system, and then working with your provisional staff on the enlisted side for our 3E positions. There's been a few ads that we've worked, we've tweaked. We want to make sure we're saying the right thing, and now with the basing announcement, it's going to help us put those out on Equal Plus to be able to hire in the near future just as well. So I just wanted to add that a little bit on the enlisted side. With all of that said, sir, will there be some positions that will, CE positions, that will remain at the MAJCOMs?
There will be. The MAJCOMs were very clear to us all, to everyone that was listening, as we talked about the AFIMSC and the stand-up of it, that they believed that they needed to have MAJCOM patch-wearing engineers on their staffs embedded to help both advocate for the engineering issues within the major command and also represent the command back to the AFIMSC and the functional communities. And so it's a significant responsibility, and it gets to that connectivity that we were talking about earlier. How do we stay connected? That was one of the things the major commands asked for in order to stay connected to us. And frankly, we think that's important to stay connected to them, and so that's how we're going to begin this in the future, is we'll have engineers with MAJCOM patches and MAJCOM assignments.
Great. Mr. Correll, you know, there are many civilians who may be reluctant to move their family, but are open to short-term deployments, maybe like up to 90 days. These could provide them a chance to contribute and share what they know with others, as well as improve their morale, refresh their skills, and learn from others in the enterprise. Can CE incorporate this into its development plan so that more people can contribute?
Great question, because it goes to the overall civilian deployment discussion. So unlike the other services, the Air Force has a little different construct with regard to how we use our civilians. Our civilians are primarily our home station continuity. And so the notion we use in Air Force, particularly in the installations world and most specifically in civil engineering, is our military forward deploy, our civilians stay home and operate our bases, because unlike the Army and the Navy, our bases have to continue to support mission even when the military are deployed. So we've never really constructed our civilian workforce to do that, or our personnel system. So consequently, at this stage of the game, what we have is pretty much only volunteer opportunities for folks to go. And when our civilians go, it's usually at some expense to the home station, because again, unlike the Army and the Navy that actually build up and hire folks to handle that mobility mission, we don't have that. So it becomes difficult for us to do that in a development standpoint, to deliberately vector someone to a deployment, because we have no deployable positions. That may change in the future as we start seeing differences in some of our bases overseas, where we have some enduring locations and we need some of that continuity. If that changes, though, what I would tell you is it's not going to be up to 90 days, and it's going to be longer than that, because our deployments today, the few civilians that we do have, are going minimum 180 days. Most of them more like a year, because again, if we're going to bring a civilian in, you would want to do it for that continuity purpose, not for the rotational piece that you get from the uniformed military today. So it's a possibility in the future. It's not very likely today, and when it comes, it will be longer than 90 days.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Chief, I'll ask you one now.
Okay, sir.
What is the forecasted manning for the 3E6 career field, and will the career field continue to be restricted from applying for special duty or developmental duty positions?
Sir, that's a great question. I'd have to probably assume it didn't come from an EOD person. It probably came from an ops management type individual. This is one of my toughest decisions that I have to make in my seat, is the number of NCOs and senior NCOs that we will allow to release for each one of our career fields. And it's a tough balance, because as any 3E6 out there knows, we've been really poorly manned in the 7th skill level, both the tech sergeants and the master sergeants, and that's really, in Jerry Lewis's opinion, the bread and butter of our organizations in the ops flight, or those ops managers. They've got such an important role within the organization. And so I can't let all of our master sergeants go out and be first sergeants. I can't let all of our tech sergeants go be TI. So I'm very cautious on how I manage those releases. We have a couple other career fields that are in the same boat, but we have worked starting back with Chief Quattrone and then Chief Abbott, and I've tried to continue to do the same thing. As we look at our sustainment charts within A1, and what they do is try to provide the right reenlistment opportunities to be able to build up that force so that we have those NCOs. As we both know, we can't just create off of the street a Master Sergeant 3E6. We can retrain a firefighter to be a 3E6, but you need that experience of that day-to-day operations as well. As we all know, and we've experienced in our different jobs throughout our career, having that experienced NCO in the operations flight is really key to keeping that chief of operations or the deputy chief out of some trouble. So we've built up the pool. If we continue with good reenlistments as we have over the last couple of years, and we really take a look at those enlisted authorizations that we have outside of the traditional CE organization, we've got 60% of our total requirements are for CE alone. That means 40% of our 3E6 7-level requirements don't even work in a CE organization. And so I've really been working with the MAJCOM functional managers. That's why their role is so important, to make sure that we only have those positions where there's an absolute military necessity. And those places that we don't, that we look to convert some of those positions to civilian. So in the future, I think there will be a better opportunity to be able to release more of our 3E6s to compete with the DSD program.
Mr. Correll, do you know if there's a plan for all affected Air Force civilians to go through the VERA VSIP and RIF if needed at the same time, or are they going to be separated in time, or what do you know?
So I can't speak for the A1, but what I will tell you is what we've done every single time for the last 4 or 5 years as we've gone through drawdowns. So let me start by saying that the Air Force has a number of different tools at its disposal when it comes time to make a drawdown, particularly in the civilian world. And it really doesn't start with VERA VSIP. As you've seen in the past few years, when we typically reduce our manpower, we remove the funding and folks stay in what we call surplus status. So they stay where they are, and for a period of time, they continue to work on the job they've always been working on, and we look for a place to put them as a vacancy becomes available. That's typically the way we would prefer to do things because it just gets you moved to a place where you can be productive for the Air Force. When we're not able to do that, or when we run out of time for whatever reason and we've really got to move people, then we try to incentivize, typically with VERA VSIP. And so I would expect that since we've done that in the past, the same kind of thing would occur in the future. And then as a last resort, we use reduction in force. Now when I bring up reduction in force, most people cringe at that, but really you ought to view it as a positive tool that we have in our personnel system that ensures that the folks that are working for us today, at all possible, we can find a place to put them. Because under a reduction in force, that tool is not about putting people out of the Air Force. It's about reducing the level of qualification to get them a broader spectrum of jobs that they can be placed against. It usually starts at the local level, so it's done in their local commuting area, and then sometimes we offer the people the opportunity to move. So as we go through drawdowns, that's been our history. I would expect that to occur. And for those who are concerned that your job is at stake, certainly anything can happen, but I will tell you in RMD 703, we reduced civilian positions in the Air Force by between 16 and 19,000, and less than 100 civilian people went out the door involuntarily. So I would tell you that we've got lots of great tools in place to help protect your career and keep you in the Air Force, and we'll do everything we can to do that.
Okay, thanks. So we've gotten to all but one of the questions, and our time is near complete, and so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up as we go through this. So once again, I want to thank you, General Carter, for joining us, Mr. Correll, Chief Lewis. It's been a conversation about a lot of the questions you submitted. We tried to run through as many of those. We're going to post the answers on Millbook as we go through afterward to make sure everybody has access to what we've discussed today. We all recognize there's many challenges associated with where we're going in the future. And I think what we've heard in some of the questions is also questions about the opportunities, and everybody's focused on. I'm a believer that there is great opportunities for our career field in the future. We're going to need engineers. We're going to need people who think like we do, who are problem solvers. And that's essentially what an engineer is. You give us a problem, and we go and solve the problem. And frankly, we need more engineers in the nation who are problem solvers and not focused on the other things. And so I think there's great opportunities. That's why we've been successful with our military, civilian, enlisted officer. As we do career broadening assignments throughout the Air Force, everybody always wants more. When we went to Afghanistan and Iraq, people wanted more airman engineers, blue suit wearing engineers in the field. As we look around, we have airmen filling positions, military and civilian, across the board. And most recently, we had one of our civilians that I know who took a job and had an opportunity in looking outside of the career field, who was snapped up at the first opportunity because they recognize what we bring to the fight. So we are going to be relevant. There's going to be opportunities for us in the future, and we're going to continue to make an impact for the Air Force, for our airmen in the future. So thanks very much for joining us today. We'll get this stuff posted. We will continue to have conversations like this. I would suspect we'll do this again this summer after the DT. We'll have a different session for civilians and the officers like we traditionally do in the summertime. And then we'll cycle back if folks find this of value, and we look forward to your feedback for that. So thanks for your time today, and have a great afternoon.